Every woman deserves to feel vibrant, safe, loved, and feel her power. The Woman's Vibrancy Code podcast is here for a potent use of your time. We will cover energy, hormones, and libido with episodes that also dive into entrepreneurship, money mindset, feminine power, and much, much more. Introducing Maraya Brown, Yale and functional medicine trained women's health expert, midwife, mom, and entrepreneur.
Hello, hello, Women's Vibrancy Code podcast. Maraya Brown here. I want to talk about vaginal pain, vaginal dryness. So once again, this is kind of a touchy, juicy subject, not necessarily for little ears, but one of those that many, many women come to me struggling with. Predominantly women transitioning through perimenopause and menopause, as well as women in the postpartum phase of life. So let's get into it. Let's talk about, what are some of the causes? What are some specific things that you can do? I mean, obviously there's always bioidentical hormones out there, but really what I'm going to talk about today is some of the things that you can do before you get to that place, or potentially in conjunction with your bioidentical hormones, depending on your preference and where you are in your life. So as a reminder, perimenopause can start as early as age 35. And it goes until you have gone a full 12 months without a vaginal bleed. And then you go, welcome, here I am into menopause. And often at some point in that journey, as well as beyond menopause, many women start struggling with vaginal dryness, vaginal pain, sometimes bleeding, sometimes irritation. And so let's really talk about it. And it's also a factor in the postpartum period right after giving birth. So let me see what I can do to swiftly give you some solutions and some education. So one of the big causes is the estrogen decline, specifically estradiol. And so when a woman is particularly in the perimenopause and menopause journey and they're struggling, when you go see your OBGYN or your primary care provider, often what they're going to lead with is vaginal estrogen, okay? Because it's one of the main causes of the decrease in kind of suppleness. So if you think about a sponge, in our younger years, when we have plenty of estrogen surging through our body, that vaginal tissue is very spongy. It lubricates easily. It's very resilient. And as the estrogen drops, specifically the estradiol, that tissue of the vaginal canal starts becoming thin. It becomes friable. It just doesn't stretch as easily, and it doesn't create lubrication as quickly. I also want to say, sometimes it's not just hormones, or sometimes it's not hormones at all. If you are struggling with vaginal dryness, it can also be a response to your partner. It can be feeling not turned on by your life. It can be from high stress levels. And so often I say, if you're not feeling your body respond, is it that is the challenge something that's happening intrinsically from a hormonal perspective, or is it simply that you're not responding to what's being offered? Right? Do you feel connected and loved and cared for? And is your partner speaking to you through your love language? Is your partner acknowledging that your arousal system is responsive, not spontaneous? And so it really means, do you wake up feeling turned on by your life? Do you feel like the interaction within your partnership is such that you feel super connected? And often that will shift the experience of vaginal dryness. So, but more specifically in today's episode, I'm going to talk pretty much about hormones and the physiology. So like I said, we're talking about vaginal dryness, itching, discomfort, sometimes yeast, but also recurrent UTIs, recurrent BV, the tissue becoming less spongy, more friable, kind of like tissue paper rather than a sponge, and then less lubrication. And then part of what's happening is the collagen and the elastin that's naturally being produced in our body decreases as we age. So there are actual anatomical changes to the body. And I say that not all women will give birth but all women will go through menopause. So this is one of those topics that does affect all women. So even if you're not there yet, it's a good thing for you to listen to preemptively prepare and prevent the not so great symptoms that can happen for some women if they don't care for themselves. I did an episode a couple of weeks ago around vaginal pH. You might want to listen into that. But one thing that's fascinating is as a woman goes into postmenopause, her vaginal pH increases, sometimes as high as over 5. Whereas a woman in premenopause is going to have that vaginal pH that's more in the normal range, below 4.5. And the higher pH is thought to be caused partially by the estrogen depletion. And so fascinatingly enough is what they found is when women are adding in actual estrogen therapy, topical estrogen therapy, there is a reduction in that vaginal pH back into the normal range. So most all women after menopause do have less vaginal lubrication, particularly if they're not supplementing with bioidentical hormones. Like I said, thinning of the tissue, the actual opening at the introitus also becomes smaller, which can affect the urethra and the bladder. So it increases the predisposition towards recurrent bladder infections or UTIs. And then that means more antibiotics prescribed and all the side effects of those antibiotics. So we definitely want to stay on top of this. And once again, it does not mean that you have to go to prescription hormones. There are a lot of other things I'll talk about that we can do. For some women, they even experience actual clitoral atrophy, which I think is fascinating. So Susan Weed is an expert for me that I love to follow. I have a number of her books. When she talks about herbs to preemptively address this, we're talking about pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds, sunflower seeds, as well as your omega. So your fish, your omega supplementation, whether that's fish omegas or vegan omegas, sea buckthorn berry, avocado, all of the normal natural sources of a healthy fat that's going to help keep the tissue more pliable and robust and spongy. Also, dark greens can enhance circulation, as well as a wide variety of berries. So if you're someone who's preemptively trying to prevent this or struggling right now, make sure you're eating lots of dark greens and a wide variety of berries every day. Your healthy phytoestrogens are really going to be helpful here. So your primrose oil, ground flax, quality soy. And when I say quality soy, I mean it needs to be non-GMO and it needs to be organic. For the primrose oil, some you can find in vaginal suppositories, but you can also just ingest it orally. And the ground flax, if you're buying ground flax, make sure you keep it in the refrigerator. It does go rancid quickly. So some really recommend that you buy flax, but it has to be ground. So if you have a Vitamix, throw it in your Vitamix. If you can keep a coffee grounder specifically for your flax seeds. And if it's too much and too overwhelming and you just want to buy ground flax like me, then I go, all right, maybe it isn't the most ideal, but I'm at least getting it into my body. And you're going to want to do that on a daily basis. The ground flax is also a great source of fiber. So if you tend towards constipation, ground flax is great for the microbiome. Some will do motherwort tincture. So that would be 25 drops a day. Also nettles. So when you're drinking your adaptogen elixirs, adding nettles in is going to be great for your adrenals, great to decrease allergies, but also can be really beneficial in this conversation. From an adaptogen perspective, shatavari, you've heard me mention, it's great for juiciness and sexuality. So adding in shatavari into your adaptogen. And then maca powder is a great antioxidant and superfood, but it's also been shown to increase testosterone levels. So in this conversation, it's not just a drop in estrogen, but it's also a drop in your testosterone levels. So getting great sleep, because that's when the majority of the testosterone is produced. Getting in some weight-bearing exercise, that's going to help produce testosterone. Even just your body weight, push-ups against the wall, push-ups down below, right? Walking upstairs, and then maca powder. Always focusing on your gut microbiome, so your probiotic and prebiotic rich foods. And you're going to hear me say this in pretty much everything I talk about. Cut out the sugar, cut out the caffeine. Okay, particularly if you're struggling with vaginal irritation, vaginal dryness. From a supplemental perspective, I already mentioned omegas. So fish oil, omegas, I like Nordic naturals, but for me and my body and my family, we do vegan omegas just because I worry about the environmental impact and the amount of BPAs in the waterways. So getting quality fish oil is difficult. I do the Juice Plus vegan omegas, doing your adaptogen elixirs every day. From a supplemental perspective, Pararia mirifica is an herb. I can put it in the show notes because spelling it is kind of difficult, but just look it up. It's Pueria, Pueria mirifica. That's another great one to help increase estrogen levels, particularly throughout this chapter in a woman's life, in that perimenopause and menopause chapter. Dr. Christiane Northrup advocates a lot for Pueria mirifica. And DHEA is another one. I did an entire episode on DHEA. You can get it in supplemental form. You can also get it in vaginal suppository and vaginal creams specifically, because what it is it's a hormone precursor and it converts into estrogen and testosterone as well as a little bit of progesterone. And when I did the Institute of Functional Medicine module on hormones specifically, it was fascinating. Pretty much everybody that was speaking to perimenopause, menopause, and vaginal dryness said to start with vaginal and oral DHEA even before going to hormones. And so doing the DHEA, make sure you do get your Dutch test to look at your estrogen levels and your testosterone levels. You can also order testosterone through blood, but taking a peek to make sure that it doesn't go too high. And then the other thing from a supplemental perspective is we're thinking, okay, so there's the hormonal aspect. There's the nutritional aspect, right? To get our healthy fats and our good nutrients and our healthy vitamin D. And we want to get lots of resveratrol in our bodies. So grapes, and actually, ironically, the stem of the grape. So throw your grapes, including the stems, in your smoothies. But also, it's a foundational factor of hydration and elasticity. Okay, so adding in your collagen on a daily basis. And many people hear about hyaluronic acid. We use it on our face for facials because it helps maintain moisture. So there's a product that's available over the counter. It's called Reverie. And what it is it's a vaginal suppository that is hyaluronic acid. So it's actually helping to maintain hydration. Okay. So we're going to hit this from all ends, right? We're going to practice stress reduction. We're going to look at our arousal system and whether we're passionate about our life and turned on by the life that we're living and the relationships that we have. We're going to hydrate well, add in quality foods, take out the foods that we know that aren't serving us. Then Reverie is going to help maintain hydration. Consuming collagen is going to help increase that elasticity. And then the vaginal DHEA is going to start supporting that hormonal makeup, as well as your maca, your Pararia mirifica. And then if that is not going well, there's always the possibility of bioidentical hormones. From a homeopathic standpoint, Bryonia, belladonna, and cantheris have all been shown to help with vaginal support. So Bryonia can help with dry vagina, even dry stools and constipation, which is fascinating. Belladonna is great for vaginal, that's like the painful dryness, whereas cantheris is specifically for like the vaginal burning and raw feeling that can come with vaginal dryness. So, I don't want to leave you overwhelmed, but I do want you to know that there are lots of possibilities. Okay. Pick two, start with two for a good 2 to 4 weeks, see how you're feeling, and then add on 2 more, right? Because we're perpetually shifting topical things, what we're putting in our mouth, how we're thinking, how we're living. So from a lifestyle perspective, we want to think back to our microbiome, right? Is there something like yeast or BV that's part of the challenge? So we look at our vaginal microbiome and making sure that we're hydrating well, we're cutting out our sugars and ideally our gluten and our dairy, cutting out the alcohol. The alcohol, it's so fascinating. A glass of wine or its equivalent is going to spike your estrogen by as much as 30%. So we think, okay, that's great. We want more estrogen. The problem is it throws us on a roller coaster. It's going to instigate a hot flash and it actually can make the scenario worse. So trying to stay away from alcohol and caffeine as best as possible. Hydrate, right? Do the things that are nourishing to your nervous system, because as the As the ovaries start slowing down and they're not producing as much of the sex hormones, your testosterone, your estrogen, as you stop ovulating, so now your body isn't producing the progesterone, what happens is it's the adrenals. They get the knock, knock, knock on the door. And so I want you to remember that hormones don't just come from the ovaries. It's not like once you go into menopause, all the hormones are gone. Hormones also get produced in the skin and the brain and the breast tissue, and the adrenals are a big piece. So practicing the stress reduction, practicing the meditation, practicing the deep breathing, drinking your adaptogen elixirs, really setting boundaries and saying no to the relationship that don't feed you and fuel you and light you up. Giving yourself permission to say no to too much work and making sure that you're getting up and moving and doing the things that light you up, hiring more staff to give you support, right? All of that is actually through a dotted line going to address the vaginal discomfort that you're experiencing. I also just want to say out loud, no fragrances. Okay. I want you to cut out the endocrine disruptors, none of the air fresheners and the fragrance filled laundry detergents, no fragrance filled wipes or douching or perfumes down there, no soap down there. Okay. That is going to further throw off your vaginal microbiome. The endocrine disruptors further throw off your hormonal makeup, right? We want to feel spectacular. Yoni steaming, I'm a big advocate of. If you don't know what yoni steaming is, please look it up. Even just doing a sitz bath with, take some comfrey leaves or get some comfrey and make an infusion and do a sitz bath with that and give yourself lots of time. When it comes to yoni steaming, you can use medicinal herbs in your yoni steam. You can also simply use water. Just the act of the steam and the heat in that area of the body is going to increase blood flow. It's going to bring it alive. It's going to add nutrients. Think about a facial, right? We want steam. We do our facials for our face. A yoni steam is a facial for our pelvic region. You might also want to look up something called the O-Shot, which is a branded version, but really it's injection therapy. I interviewed Dr. McLean Duncan on the podcast. You can go back and listen to that episode, but we're looking at injection therapy from the perspective of ozone therapy, PRP, and the O-Shot specifically is branded to bring the clitoris and the vaginal area alive again. If part of your challenge is that you're finding a reduction in innervation, a reduction in sensation, and now you are having a really hard time reaching climax or making it to the place of orgasm. It's just like you're just not, it feels like it's almost dull or dead down there and you're wanting to bring it alive again. Doing injection therapy or something like an O-Shot, vaginal rejuvenation, it's definitely worth looking up. I also want to say out loud, we need to rule some things out. So if you're still menstruating and you're struggling with vaginal dryness, I've had women, the menstrual cup was the culprit. Or once again, using soap. We don't want to use soap down there, just water. What type of underwear are you using? Sometimes shifting from lace or satin over to organic cotton can be the thing that makes the difference. The last thing I want to say from a lifestyle perspective is increasing our estrogen. Yes, it's adrenal health. Yes, it's supplementation, hormonal support, lifestyle change, addressing our relationship with our sexuality, but also from the perspective of feminine power. I think it's really fascinating listening to a recorded interview with John Gray, who wrote Women Are from Venus, Men Are from Mars. The simple act of a woman asking for help can show an increase in her estrogen level. Sharing appreciation, prioritizing ourselves, saying no to things that don't serve us, not overdoing it. Those simple changes can actually, over time, impact your hormonal makeup. So once again, just because you're going through your 40s and 50s in this chapter of perimenopause and menopause does not mean that all of a sudden you don't have any hormones. Okay, hormones come from all different places. I'm not opposed to bioidentical hormones. I think that they definitely have their part. I'm not a big fan of synthetic progestins. If you're going to add in progesterone, make sure that it's actual progesterone, not the synthetic progestins. And like I mentioned, you can do Reverie for hydration. DHEA, as well as you can get like compounded bioidentical. When I was running the women's health at the local functional medicine practice here, there was a compounding pharmacy and we used Yaya cream, which had estrogen, progesterone, DHEA, and testosterone all in a cream that was a vaginal suppository. One last thing, and that's from the perspective of lubrication. So if you are struggling with vaginal dryness, you're taking all of these steps. Obviously, if you're in the postpartum space, I didn't touch on that a whole lot. A lot of what I have said is relevant and applicable when it comes to adding in additional hormones. That gets a little bit more touchy if you're breastfeeding. And estrogen, you definitely want to consult your healthcare provider. You don't want to add on too soon postpartum because there is some cardiovascular risk that you have to consider. But talking about lubrication, this is for all women. Okay. I think sometimes we put too much pressure on ourselves that we have to produce all the lubrication for the entire act of lovemaking. And it's okay to use a lot of lubricant. Allow it to be fun. Allow it to be playful. Allow it to be copious. If you are in a sexual relationship that does not require condoms, I actually prefer oils like jojoba oil, almond oil, and it's very nourishing. You can also get like CBD oil lubricants. I'll put a link in the show notes for my favorite CBD oil. That's a vaginal lubricant. It's called the O-Shot. And you can also use aloe. You can take slippery elm powder and mix it with water and heat it up. And that's a great lubricant if you want to make your own at home. There's also vaginal probiotics that you can get if it's a vaginal microbiome scenario. And then the last thing, I know I keep saying I'm on the last one, but I do want to touch on toys. So there's a Joy Lux red light technology that's actually vaginal rejuvenation. So it's going to stimulate blood flow, collagen, and circulation. I'll put that link in the show notes, but just look up Joy Lux, JOYLUX. And I think that's enough for now. Hopefully you don't feel like you've drank through a fire hose. This might be one you want to re-listen to. Sit down and take notes when you're able. I want you to know that there's lots of hope. Okay. You do not have to struggle with vaginal dryness or pain for a long time. Women in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, postpartum, 30s, 20s, all ages can continue to experience a healthy and comfortable and enjoyable experience of their yonis, of their vulvas, of their vaginas, and of penetration if you choose to participate in that way. But more than anything, that you can feel vital and young and passionate for as long as you would like. So wish you well. This episode and the one on the vaginal microbiome are both a little bit racy, and I think important conversations to be having. Hopefully this is helpful. Please follow the episode, follow the podcast. Please give a review. Every review I do read, and it means a lot to me. You're always welcome to reach out my way and inquire about working one-on-one or in group settings with the Women's Vibrancy Code, the Women's Vibrancy Accelerator, or my VIP concierge space, as well as my in-person women's retreats. In all of them, we are going to help you find answers to your hormonal well-being, your health, your passion, so that you can come alive and serve the world more greatly. Because I know that you're destined for greatness and the world needs you to feel spectacular. So with that, ta-ta for now. Thanks for listening in. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to the Women's Vibrancy Code. Connect with us and take the first step to transforming your energy, hormones, and libido at thewomensvibrancycode.com. Cheers to your zest and vitality. Make sure to follow for weekly power-packed value.